They laughed when the old man's hand shook coffee spilling just a little across the diner counter. The youngest sailor scoffed, saying he must have borrowed those medals too clean for someone his age. Then his wallet slipped open, sunlight hit a worn Navy ID edges frayed like salt-touched rope, the name still bold enough to silence a room. Quietly, the jukebox clicked, the flag outside caught the wind, and every man there learned how respect sounds when it finally arrives. The Harbor Light Diner smelled of bacon salt and wet asphalt after a dawn shower. Outside, the Memorial Day flags clung to the poles, their fabric snapping whenever a truck passed the corner. Inside, the air hummed with silverware and old Sinatra on a local station, the kind of song that filled the pauses between lives. 3 young sailors in spotless whites occupied the center booth. Their laughter bounced against the chrome and glass, bright and sharp as coins. They'd come from the base to kill an hour before the parade duty, full of caffeine and the confidence that only fresh insignia could give. At the counter sat an old man, alone, gray hair trimmed short, posture straight, though his jacket sagged at the shoulders. The blue cloth was sun-faded, its patches dulled by decades of wash and weather. He stirred his coffee slowly, the spoon touching porcelain, with a rhythm that seemed deliberate, almost ceremonial. "Hey," one of the sailors called to the waitress loud enough for everyone to hear. "Who's the guy in the antique shop over there borrowed those medals from his grandpa?" The diner's chatter thinned. Martha, the waitress, shot him a look over her glasses. The old man didn't lift his head. He just set the spoon down, folded the napkin neatly, and smiled at nothing in particular. The second sailor smirked. "Probably one of those, stolen valor types." The word hung in the heat, like static. For a moment, even the radio dimmed behind the hiss of the coffee pot. The old man's name was Ray Cole, though no one here knew it yet. He had been up since before sunrise, walking the harbor to watch the ships dress in flags. The diner was a habit from another lifetime, a small ritual that kept the morning square and honest. He reached for his wallet to pay. As he pulled out, a 5-something metallic peeked from the fold, a worn Navy ID. The laminate yellowed, the photo blurred. The light from the window caught it just enough to flash, and then it disappeared again beneath his fingers. Eli, the young waiter, froze mid-step. He'd served the table of sailors earlier, joked with them about parade duty. Now a knot tightened behind his ribs. "Sir, you all set?" he asked gently. Ray nodded. "Yes, son. Just the coffee." He counted exact change, 3 singles, 2 quarters, and set them precisely on the counter. Then, with the same care, he wiped a ring of coffee from the formica surface. One of the sailors laughed again, though softer this time. "Guess he's saving for new patches." Martha's voice cut through before Ray could answer. "You boys got jokes, but that man's been paying my rent and tips since before you learned to salute." A low chuckle rippled from an older couple in the corner. The tension eased, but only slightly. Ray slipped his wallet back into his jacket. He glanced toward the window where the flag outside rippled under the coastal wind. "Fine morning for colors," he said quietly. No one replied. The sailors looked down at their plates, suddenly intent on their toast. He turned to Eli. "Keep the change, kid." Eli hesitated. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," Ray said. "Just keep the coffee hot for whoever needs it next." He rose slowly, joints stiff but precise, like a man still moving to the rhythm of reveille. As he reached the door, the bell above it chimed. Outside, sunlight spilled across the street, reflecting off chrome bumpers and the diner's glass sign. For a second, that glint returned the same light that had touched the hidden ID. It flickered across the counter and disappeared. Then the radio changed tracks. The opening bars of "Fly Me to the Moon" filled the quiet. Inside, the sailors said nothing. Martha refilled their mugs without a word. Eli stood behind the counter, staring at the empty stool and the small pool of steam still rising from the half-finished cup. The Memorial Day parade horns echoed faintly from downtown, distant yet steady. In that sound, the old man's absence felt larger than the room itself, an outline carved by silence, respect, and something unspoken that every one of them suddenly understood, but could not name. The next morning, the diner was quieter. The holiday crowd had moved on, leaving only the low hum of the fridge and the smell of burnt toast. Sunlight poured through the window blinds, turning the counter into a series of golden bars. Eli wiped the same counter 3 times before realizing it didn't need cleaning. He wasn't thinking about the stains. He was thinking about the old man who'd sat there yesterday, about the silence that had followed. When the doorbell chimed, he turned faster than he meant to. Ray Cole stepped inside, same jacket, same calm. He chose the same stool as if no time had passed. Eli's voice came out uncertain. "Morning, sir." "Coffee." Ray smiled faintly. "If it's hot, I'll take it." Eli filled the cup without being asked. The steam curled upward like breath on a cold deck. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said. "Those kids were well out of line." Ray shook his head. "No harm done. They'll figure life out when it stops saluting them." The line landed soft but true. Eli caught himself smiling. "You served long enough to forget how many birthdays happened in dry dock." He took a sip and nodded at the flavor. "Engines never quit, only men do. You take care of a thing, right? It'll take care of you." Eli leaned on the counter. "You were a mechanic." "Flight engineer," Ray said. "Back when everything had more bolts than screens." As he set the cup down, Eli noticed something beneath it, a corner of an old photograph sticking out from the condensation ring. He lifted the cup and froze. It was a black and white shot of a half-dozen sailors standing on a carrier deck, shirts off, smiles wide, their hands stained with oil. A young Ray stood among them. He turned the photo toward the old man. "That you?" Ray nodded. "That's the crew. We used to joke that if you listened close enough, an engine would tell you what was wrong. Those boys could hear everything." The jukebox clicked behind them, the needle skipping over a track. A brief pop of static filled the room, then silence. Outside, the flag's shadow moved slowly across Ray's face, dividing the years like a sundial. From the kitchen doorway, Martha called out, her voice thick with impatience. "Eli, quit yappin'. Those plates won't serve themselves." "Yes, ma'am," Eli answered, then lowered his voice. "She's not big on small talk." Ray chuckled. "She runs this place the way a chief runs a ship." "Doesn't mean she doesn't care," Martha muttered as she passed by, coffee pot in hand. "These old guys think they built the Navy." The remark floated long enough for everyone to feel it. Eli opened his mouth to defend him, but Ray just lifted his hand. "Let it be, kid," he said quietly. Still, he just smiled. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was weighted like something respectful was happening, without needing permission. Eli poured more coffee, even though Ray's cup was half full. "What keeps you coming here?" Eli asked. Ray looked at the photo again. "Familiar noise," he said. "Coffee, laughter, dishes. Same sounds we had on the carrier. Different walls, same comfort." He slipped the photo back into his jacket pocket with the care of a man folding a flag. "You ever miss it?" Eli asked. Ray nodded once. "Every day that starts quiet." Outside, a gull screeched over the harbor. Inside, the bell above the door jingled as a couple walked in. Life resumed its normal volume. Martha called across the counter. "You staying for breakfast, Ray?" He smiled. "Just coffee today. Some mornings you only need the smell of bacon to remember." Eli grinned. I'll keep the pot full. Ray met his eyes, something kind but distant in the look. That's what keeps the world running, son. Someone who remembers to refill the pot. Then he turned toward the window, where sunlight hit the flag just right, making the red look almost alive again. The moment held a bridge between memory and motion, between the noise of youth and the patience of those who had already heard every kind of engine hum. Afternoon light pressed against the diner's windows, turning the chrome into soft gold. The place was half empty now, a quiet hour between the lunch crowd and the fishermen who'd drift in later. The overhead fan hummed in lazy circles, the sound blending with the hiss of the coffee maker, a sound Ray Cole found oddly comforting. He sat at the same stool, his jacket folded beside him. Eli leaned on the far counter, pretending to polish a cup, but mostly just listening. You ever get tired of the noise? The young waiter asked. Ray smiled without looking up. There's no such thing as silence when you've worked around engines your whole life. Even when they stop, you hear them in your bones. The fan above gave a soft rattle, and Ray's gaze drifted past the window. Reminds me of a storm, he said quietly. Carrier deck, 1974. South China Sea. Night so black you couldn't tell sky from water. The diner faded in his memory, replaced by the roar of turbines and wind. He could feel the deck trembling under his boots, the rain whipping sideways. Engines were screaming. That night, he continued. We had one bird dead on the pad, power unit flooded. A kid barely 20 thought the thing was cursed. He wanted to shut it down, write it off. But I told him, no machine quits on its own. You just haven't learned what it's trying to tell you yet. He paused, listening to the hum above him, as though it were that same old engine still speaking through time. Eli asked, What happened? Ray's eyes softened. We stripped the panel in the rain, felt around till I found the line. Hairline crack. Couldn't see it, but I could feel it. We patched it with chewing gum and a prayer. He chuckled at the memory. Bird flew before dawn. That kid, he didn't stop shaking till we landed. The sound of the diner returned, dishes clinking, the murmur of conversation. Ray blinked, pulling himself back from the sea. Eli said, You ever see him again every time I close my eyes? The young man hesitated. So you still hear the engines? Always. They don't quit, son. They just change pitch. There was a silence then, not empty but full, like the quiet after thunder. The overhead fan's rhythm matched the heartbeat of that old memory. The sound bridged the years. Ray reached for his wallet to pay, but as he moved it, the corner of the old photograph slid loose again. Eli leaned forward to catch it before it fell, and saw something else glint from the fold, the edge of the Navy ID. Its laminate catching the afternoon light. For a moment, photo and ID overlapped, the younger and older Ray side by side, one in oil-stained blues, the other in fading gray. Eli didn't speak. He just looked at the image, then at the man. Something in his chest shifted, not pity, not awe exactly, but recognition. Ray noticed the glance. Curious, Eli nodded. Guess I am. Ray took the photo back gently, sliding it into the wallet. Curiosity's good. Means you're listening. Most folks stopped listening to the world once everything got screens and buttons. Machines still talk, they just whisper now. Wish I could hear what you do, you will, Ray said. Takes time. And silence. Then something on the wallet caught the light again, a single flare, quick and silver like the spark of an engine coming alive. Ray closed it softly. Every sound has a story, kid. You just have to know when it's telling you to pay attention. The overhead fan hummed steady, blending the diner's air with the pulse of his memory. Eli stood there, in quiet understanding, realizing he was learning something far bigger than mechanics. He was being handed a way of listening to life itself. Outside, a gull cried over the bay. Inside, the coffee maker clicked off, and for just one breath, there really was silence. The Harbor Light diner was full again, sunlight glancing off chrome napkin holders and the edges of plates. Ray Cole sat in his usual spot, coffee cooling beside him. He seemed carved out of calm while the world hurried past. At the booth by the window, the same sailors from earlier in the week had returned. Their laughter was quieter now, more careful. Martha poured their refills without comment. Eli wiped the counter, pretending not to watch. When the check arrived, Ray reached for his wallet. His fingers slipped. The leather hit the tile, and a Navy ID slid out, spinning once before landing face up. The sunlight caught it perfectly, the old photo gleaming like metal. For a heartbeat, the diner froze. Forks paused. Even the fan above seemed to stall mid-turn. One sailor whispered, "Sir." "That's real, isn't it?" Eli stepped forward. His voice was steady this time. "The ships you serve," he said. "Run on his hands." The words landed heavy, honest. No one laughed. Martha was already bending down to pick up the wallet. She laid it on the counter in front of Ray like an offering. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "you didn't need to prove anything." Ray met her eyes. "Didn't come here too." The sailors stood awkward now, all starch gone from their uniforms. "We're sorry, sir," the youngest said. Ray looked at them, calm as tidewater. "That's all right. Every storm starts with someone thinking they already know the weather." A thin smile crossed the sailor's face. "You were a chief." "Worked engines," Ray answered. "Kept the noise steady." He reached for his wallet, hand steady despite the tremor in the air. Eli saw how the sunlight framed him, how the years and the silence hung around his shoulders. He was slammed by the weight of protocol, not by rank or rule, but by the quiet pressure of respect finally returned. One of the sailors stepped closer. "It'd be an honor, sir." Ray took the offered hand. "Mutual," he said simply. Outside, the flags rippled. Light pooled across the counter, soft as forgiveness. Ray slipped the ID back into his wallet like someone closing a promise. He nodded toward their plates. "Eat before it gets cold." They obeyed. Martha leaned against the coffee machine, blinking fast. Eli stood still, memorizing the shape of that moment, the hush that follows understanding. The jukebox needle dropped again. Sinatra's voice rose low and smooth. Ray lifted his cup, half empty, half warm, yet he only smiled. The sunlight caught the corner of his ID one last time before disappearing into shadow. Morning came soft and salt bright over Harbor Light Diner. The air smelled of rain and roasted beans. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, landing on the same counter where Ray Cole usually sat. Only today the stool was empty. Martha noticed it first. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" she murmured. Eli nodded while pouring the first pot of coffee, like the place forgot its heartbeat. The bell above the door jingled. 3 sailors stepped in, the same boys from before. No swagger this time. Their uniforms were neat, but their expressions were careful, almost reverent. The diner's usual chatter dimmed as they walked to Ray's stool. Eli froze mid-step. "Morning, fellas." The tallest nodded. "We just came to drop something off." He set a small paper bag on the counter and looked at the empty stool. "He comes here early, right?" "Usually," Martha said, watching them closely. "You just missed him." The sailor hesitated, then pulled out a folded navy patch, old-style embroidery edges clean from new issue. Beneath it, a diner receipt. Across the slip in neat block letters, someone had written, "Thank you, sir." They placed it carefully on the counter beside an untouched mug. No one spoke for a while. Even the fan seemed to turn slower. One sailor adjusted his collar. "We shouldn't have said what we did. He carried more weight than any of us ever will." Martha's voice softened. "He knows. Men like that always do." The young man gave a small nod, left a 10 on the counter, and turned toward the door. Eli managed a grin. "Guess he tipped better than we did." The sailors smiled at that small, honest smiles before slipping out into the morning. When the door closed, the bell chimed once, sharp and bright, like a salute in sound. Martha looked at the patch and the note again. "Some things don't need speeches," she said quietly. Eli poured another cup, even though no one sat there. "Think he'll be back?" "Maybe," she said, pinning the note to the bulletin board beside the kitchen window. "But even if he's not, this stays." The paper fluttered gently in the draft from the fan. The handwriting looked almost like a signature on the wall, simple proof that respect once found doesn't vanish. Later that afternoon, a delivery driver stopped in for coffee to go. He noticed the board and smiled. "Mind if I take a picture of that?" Martha shrugged. "It's public property now." By evening, the note's image had already been printed and taped up on the post office notice board 2 blocks away. Beneath it, someone scribbled in pencil, "Harbor Light, thanks its own." As twilight set in, Eli wiped the counter again. The coffee mug still sat in front of Ray's stool, steam curling upward into the dim light. He turned to Martha. "You think he'll see it?" She looked toward the window where the flag's shadow moved slowly across the stool. "Oh, he'll see it," she said. "Men like him always notice what others overlook." The jukebox clicked to another song, a soft brass melody from the 60s. The hum of the fan, the scent of coffee, and the faint clatter of dishes filled the space that Ray had left behind, turning absence into a kind of peace. But the coffee still steams. The morning after Memorial Day, the diner was quiet enough to hear the clock tick behind the counter. The storm of chatter of pride and apology had passed. All that remained was sunlight and the faint smell of salt drifting in through the open door. Eli came in early, whistling half a tune before realizing Ray's stool was empty again. He frowned, wiping the counter as habit more than duty. The mug from yesterday still sat where it had been left, washed, but not moved. Something else caught his eye. Beneath the counter, tucked neatly beside the napkin rack, was a small, worn Navy ID. "Mr. Cole," he murmured, looking toward the window, as if the old man might appear out of the glare. He picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hand. The photo was faded, the name barely legible. On the back, written in steady, uneven ink, were 7 words, "Still carry it, you know, not for me, for them." Eli's breath caught. He looked toward the diner's front glass where the flag outside moved in the breeze, its reflection trembling across the counter. Martha came in a moment later, carrying the morning paper. "You open already, yeah?" he said quietly, showing her the card. She read the words once, twice, and then smiled, the kind of smile that carried more weight than words ever could. "He left it on purpose." Eli nodded. "Guess he figured someone should hold it for a while." She looked at him. "Then don't lose it." He slipped the ID into a simple wood frame from the back office, the kind used for old menu photos, and placed it beneath the counter, where customers could see if they looked close enough. The patch and note from the sailors still hung on the bulletin board. Beneath them, the framed ID now glowed softly in the morning light. For a while, neither of them spoke. The diner filled with the small, familiar sounds of its own breathing spoons, plates, the gentle hiss of the coffee pot. Martha broke the silence. "He'll be back, you think?" Eli shook his head slowly. "I think he already is." The jukebox clicked, and a quiet instrumental began something old, maybe Glenn Miller or late Sinatra. Sunlight poured through the blinds, striping the booth where Ray had once sat. Dust floated in the light, like memory that refused to fade. Outside, the flag shifted again, its shadow falling perfectly across the chrome counter and the small wooden frame. Eli poured 2 cups of coffee. One for himself, one left steaming beside the framed ID. He leaned against the counter and looked toward the door just in case. "Still carry it," he whispered the words, rolling soft, almost prayer-like. A slow fade, the empty booth, the warm light, the flag's reflection steady on metal. "If this story moved, you share it forward." The Harbor Light Diner opened to another calm morning sunlight spilling through the blinds and glinting off the frame beneath the counter. The old Navy ID edges worn words steady as the tide. Still, Eli kept pouring 2 cups each day, one for himself, one for the man who'd left more proof than any story could tell. The note on the back read like a benediction, "Still carry it, you know, not for me, for them." And somehow that promise seemed to hum through the chrome and coffee steam, through every morning sir, whispered by those who'd learned respect the quiet way. Then the jukebox clicked, the blinds flickered gold, and the flag outside lifted in the wind, soft applause for a man who never asked for any. He still carries it.